Welcome, welcome. I'm Allison Kinnear, and today we're going to be talking about judgment. Now, here's the thing, there is a difference between being judgmental of other people and being discerning of other people. Today, we're not going to talk about being discerning. And what I mean by being discerning is kind of going, this is kind of how I operate. I see how that person operates. It doesn't seem like it's a good fit, right? Like we can be discerning about what it is we see and decide for ourselves if we are going to interact with somebody or go into a situation or not. That's discernment. Today, what I want to talk about is judgment. Judgment meaning when we are kind of going, you are a bad person, or there is something wrong with you, or being kind of harsh on other people. So, for example, we can be very judgmental about people's appearance, parenting styles. We can be highly judgmental about what people eat, how they live their life. And here's what I want to just say is like when we become hyper focused on how other people, what values they have. We just had an election yesterday, so we can be hyper judgmental about people's political affiliations. And there are a lot of reasons, and again, this is where we get to go, well, this is, I have a judgment, I have a bias against a particular affiliation. However, or we can also, or rather, and we can also be discerning and be like, yeah, that represents a lot of things that I'm not into. And so we get to be deciding around that, right? And yet, we can be unduly judgmental about things too, where we can lump a whole human being into a category and kind of cast them off. And this is a dynamic that's very much human nature, and yet something very important to build awareness around and curiosity around. So let me give you a less hot button topic. Let's go for parenting. So somebody says, oh, I would never give my child a pacifier, or I would never co-sleep, or I would never breastfeed in public, or I would never, whatever the thing is. We can make these assumptions that people who do those things are either bad parents or good parents, and just kind of brush things with a broad stroke. But here's the thing that's interesting. When we are judgmental, when we make up these rules about how things should be, then that, well, it seems to be about the other person, it's actually a reflection of ourselves. So if I think no parent should ever give a child a pacifier, chances are I have some kind of shame or judgment about self-soothing, about pacifiers and things in mouths, that I have some kind of judgment. This works also with appearance. If people are commenting about strangers' bodies or clothes, then there is a high likelihood that that person has a lot of self-judgment about their body and how it looks in clothes. That's how this kind of judgment works, which is different than discernment. Like oftentimes we're judgmental of people we don't really know that well, or people we're not willing to get to know very well. And what's interesting is that once you get to know someone well, all of those judgments tend to break down and erode. This becomes really important because then we can, nobody likes a hypocrite. Nobody enjoys being around people who are hypocritical. And so if you're like, oh, I have no judgment around bodies and things, and then you're like, can you believe what she's wearing today? Look at that. Or if we're like, oh yeah, I want all moms to feel welcome. And then we're saying things like, oh, you're going to breastfeed here? Or, oh, your child's on formula? Or whatever the case may be. Sorry, phone on. That is a reflection of the individual person and the unresolved judgment that they have towards themselves. Because the people who don't really have a lot of shame around parenting or don't have a lot of self-judgment around their body, they don't even notice this. They don't even notice what people are wearing or what their bodies look like or what their parenting styles are. They're just kind of accepting of, yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do things. So here's the thing to think about is that if you have judgments that you make of other people, and again, these are those quick fire judgments that really you don't get curious about. You're just like, oh no, I can't stand people who are blah. Then it becomes important to get a little curious with yourself, to go, how much of that judgment is something that's unresolved with me? This is that whole, like, when you're pointing forward, you have all these fingers pointing back at you, right? So if your tendency is to do this with other people about what they're eating, what they're looking like, who they're voting for, things like that, how much of that is some judgment that I may have for me? And how much of that is being discerning and just being like, yeah, I just find that I have a hard time connecting with when people are kind of like this, or if they vote in this certain way, or if they engage in this kind of dialogue, or if they're, I don't know, they eat meat, or whatever the case may be. There's just like too many differences. And yet, even if there's too many differences, how can we still remember the humanity of the other person? Because when we get judgmental, we can very easily dehumanize another person. And that's something that I see a lot of, especially when it comes to our political atmosphere, is a lot of dehumanizing the other people going in both directions. And that's a dangerous place to be. So that becomes important then for us to kind of tune back into our own humanity so we can remember to tune into the humanity of others. So just be aware of that. First of all, for yourself, when am I judging other people and what does that say about me? And when is it I have some unresolved stuff versus this is a discernment that I'm making? And also, if you are feeling the judgment of others, if you are feeling judged by others about the state of your house, about parenting, about your weight, or whatever the case may be, just keep in mind that this may not be about you. That there is a very, very, very high likelihood that this is about them and their stuff, their unresolved stuff. It's my PSA for today, or my public service announcement. Thank you so much for being here. I love coming on every Wednesday. If you have a topic that you would like for me to riff on and talk about, put it in the comments or send me a message. I love to be able to do that. All right, take care. Bye.